Daniel, welcome. We already kick-started our discussion in the morning in the reception lobby. We're going to change the batteries to the microphone. I will give you mine. But yeah, do start the discussion. There's also microphones in the audience. Ideally, please use them so we can pick up the sound as this conversation will be recorded. But yeah, since you guys already started talking, please do repeat the question, and then we can jump in and dive deeper.
Yeah, so there are 6 niches. There are political, environmental, and so on. So my question was if the political or if companies develop some products and apply them into the political niche, if that niche is the most important one.
So in my talk, I know you weren't able to see it. I argued that there are 6 singularities. There are 6 points in time that we can't see beyond. And it could be good, it could be bad. We don't know. That's the whole point of a singularity. And I try to use the pestle framework to try to kind of articulate them. So political singularity is a world where people no longer know what is true. It's a post-truth world. The environmental singularity is when we either get control or lose control of our ecosystem. The social singularity is when we cure death. The technological singularity is when we build a superintelligence. The legal singularity is when essentially surveillance becomes ubiquitous, so we know what everybody's thinking and feeling. And the economic singularity is when we automate the majority of human labor. And the question, I think, is which is the most important? I think that they're all important. I think that one might argue that we're already living maybe in a post-truth world, and that is something we need to address because of the spread of misinformation and its effect on our political foundations. And it's just going to become more prevalent. In fact, actually, I suggest to people now that they need to have safe words when talking to people on the phone and things like that to make sure that they're not talking to an AI, but actually talking to the real person. So facing into this problem of misinformation, of authentication. So can you authenticate the provenance of some information? So can you make sure that you can understand and trace it back where it comes from? I think is important. Can you also determine how harmful a piece of content is? So is this going to trigger a community? Is it going to enforce bias or bigotry? And so that's also an issue. In terms of whether I think that's more important than the others, I think we've got to face into all of them over the next 10 years. And if I was a startup, I would try and have a high level purpose, which would be hopefully addressing a big problem we have facing the world. But it's really up to you as an entrepreneur. But at the same time, I would also figure out who is it, what product or service am I building, who am I selling it to, and why? What pain point do they feel, and why would they buy from me rather than buy from somebody else? The purpose is really sort of a cherry on top, but if I advise entrepreneurs, and that whilst purpose is important, understanding specifically the problem you're solving and who you're solving that for, and why they would pay you over somebody else is important. And if you can somehow link your product or service to purpose, then that's great. I think like Unilever, I think they produce a huge amount of stuff, but their purpose is to try to give everybody access to free water. Those two are kind of contradictory in some respects. The purpose or vision of Oxfam, the charity, is to eradicate poverty. Now, in a world where you don't have poverty, you don't have Oxfam. If that makes sense, you don't need to have an Oxfam if in a world without poverty. So, but if you can somehow tie what your products and services do to purpose, that's great. It doesn't matter if that's the case, but I think having both are important. If that answers your question.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So just to repeat my previous question, which was not on the tape, if you can talk more about how AI can make an impact in sustainability specifically, like getting carbon out, transitioning to renewables, transitioning away from fossil fuels and those things.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I don't know enough about the specific applications to sustainability. What I do know is that if there's a huge amount of inefficiencies that go on in the world. There's inefficiencies in terms of how we stock our warehouses, how we distribute our goods, even how we create content. We have to film fly people around the world and film scenes and whatnot. And generative AI is able and allowing us to create content now much more cheaply. So I think sustainability and the cost of energy to solve problems is a differentiator. So if one solution is very expensive because it's using a lot of energy, and another solution comes along that's more efficient, then it's the new solution that will win. And I think that this kind of pressure to reduce the amount of energy required to produce and create goods, I think is a good kind of selection pressure for goods. That said, I think DeepMinder are working on how we create nuclear fusion. So that in theory, if works, could make energy more abundant. There's a lot of concern at the moment about the energy required to train large language models, and large language models are very inefficient in terms of how they run, how they learn. I think you all probably know this and read this. There's actually a new emerging technology, AI technology, that's coming out of academia at the moment that are much more aligned to how our brains work. So our brains run on the power of a light bulb. We learn very quickly. We generalize very quickly. We're engaging in continuous environments, and these new AIs that are coming out of academia are hundreds or thousands of times more efficient than large language models. They're not particularly good at language right now, but they're good at navigating the world, and that will also then, I think, they will be the brains for robots. Now there'll be a question about how much resource is going to be required to build robots, because it requires material stuff. That said, my hope is that entrepreneurs come up with new innovations that will allow us to get control and solve some of these macro problems. One of the macro problems being losing control of our ecosystem. And when I see the investment community, they're also investing in solutions that are much more energy efficient. So I don't know. I think that we will get control of our ecosystem. But I don't know how AI specifically will solve that problem. That said, sorry, I do think that right now we have large language models are like an intoxicated graduate, and in the next year they will graduate to a master's level. So reasoning will become, a step change in their intelligence, like the previous speaker said, and then what will happen is that they'll graduate from master's level to PhD level, and that's probably going to be about 18 months. And then from a PhD level to a postdoc level, and then from a postdoc to a professor. So I think I was actually very fortunate to be on a yacht last week with Elon Musk, and he thinks that we'll have AI more intelligent than us next year. I think that it's probably going to be more like 4 or 5 years. But if we can build more intelligent AIs, we can ask them, how do we solve some of these big problems? What's exciting for me is that these AIs are essentially free for everybody. Everybody now has access to this incredible technology because of actually the capitalistic pressure, which is weird because Google and Microsoft, their revenue models are dependent upon selling cloud and having these large language models essentially get consumed on cloud. The reason why Meta can open source their large language models, their technologies, is because it doesn't hurt them at all. It doesn't hurt their business model. In fact, it makes them look cool. So ironically, it's the capitalistic pressure that will make more and more of these technologies free for everybody.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
We see that using AI is an issue in every corporate enterprises, but we think that the guys who has the domain knowledge of that company is not the same guys who has the technology knowledge of using AI. And what do you think? What is the best approach for organizations to upskilling on the natural domain knowledge guys to use this, or we should exchange them? But of course, it's impossible. That what is your opinion about the upskilling, digital upskilling issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are broadly kind of one of the things I think is important is that education at the moment tests for knowledge, and our education system tests for knowledge. So we do tests and things like that. And I think we all know that it's not really a good mechanism to understand people's contribution. But the best thing to do is get people solving problems in difficult situations, learning about how they can apply their creativity, robustness, resilience. So all of those things that we value in each other, I think our education system needs to cultivate instead of just knowledge. So that's a big problem to solve. But right now inside our organizations, there are broadly two skills that we need to be cultivating. One is being able to ask better questions of AI. So think of AIs as being intoxicated graduates, or over the coming years becoming a co-worker that is really smart. So your differentiation is going to be how well you can orchestrate the AIs. How well can I get them to work collaboratively to solve a problem? And that actually really means understanding how to get people also collaborating. So learning about actually innovation methodologies, and there are methodologies for innovation. There's a Russian methodology called TRIZ. There's a US methodology called Synectics, and these are all methodologies to essentially come up with new ideas, to test ideas, and to see how valuable they are. And so I think teaching people how to ideate, how to be creative, how to explore, and then how to orchestrate people and AIs to get to the best solutions is one skill. So I'm in the ad industry now, and so we have creatives that are asking questions of the AI to create ads. And what we've found also is that those creatives that have backgrounds in history or geography or like art history, for example, or photography like lighting and aperture and camera angles, they're able to ask much better questions of the AI. So they can refer to some abstract or obscure artist that we have never heard of, or some moment in history that can then surface better insights from the AI. So asking good questions of the AI is a good skill to develop, which is practice. Orchestrating AIs is another skill. And then finally, if ultimately you want to have deep AI expertise to innovate as well. So now, unfortunately, many of us can't necessarily afford to attract deep AI talent. There's only a handful of deep minds in the world. I'd like to think that my company is a deep mind who joined WPP, and I know how hard it is to attract like PhD professor level people, and you have to pay them lots of money, you have to give them equity, you have to give them a purpose as well. It's really important that they have a purpose. And by the way, actually, once you reach a certain amount of money, in terms of salary, money becomes less important to people. Pretty much for everybody, money is important. But you can get to the point where you can take money off the table. And then what matters is, are you working on interesting things that are with nice people that are ultimately linked to a bigger purpose? And that's how you're going to attract AI talent as well. Does that make sense at all?
One further step. So how can you organize this if you need to do it for thousands of people, for example? So talent mastery programs or like corporate universities or workshops. So what are the options for increasing the reach of this mindset that you mentioned?
So I try to increase the reach by doing lots of talks. So one of the reasons I'm out here is to try to spread the word. And but I think if you ask most educators, they will say that our education systems are not testing for what we need to test for. That we need to develop and cultivate creativity and robustness and resilience. It's just doing that is hard. The fact is that AI is going to change how education systems are going to work, because we can all go to ChatGPT and get it to write our essays and answer our questions for us. So the education system is going to change. And the other thing as well, which I think is quite exciting, and I talked about this concept of digital twins in the talk. So one of the things that I like the idea of is having this digital representation of you. So rather than you having a job role, which we all, by the way, we don't actually do our job role, we do things that are not our job, but you are a collection of skills and hopes, dreams, desires, relationships. You're a plethora of different things. And so if AI can help you understand what those things are, and they can then allocate or recommend things for you to work on, to also develop your skills. So you say, I want to develop my skills over here, then I think the AI can actually help us do that. rather than just having a job role, which is it's not granular enough. So my hope is that over the next 3 to 5 years, AI will be used to granularize ways in which people can contribute and then be smarter at then identifying the opportunities for them to develop their career. That's what I hope will happen.
We have a question there in front.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Today you were speaking about different organizational models, right? So like a lot of levels in hierarchy, and then more flat structure, operational, organizational model, whatever. And then you spoke about, I believe, a liquid model, with different connections between different parts of organization. But what I see as a challenge, especially for huge companies, the hierarchy is very essential. So we have the board of directors, you have different chief officers, and again you go down. So maybe you can make a few good examples of how big companies, let's say with tens of thousands of employees, have been transformed successfully to something with, let's say, a liquid organizational model. And the second question, maybe you can also augment your answer with information about the performance evaluation of employees based on those insights that you gather from data about your employees.
Really great questions. No, thank you. So I think, interestingly, if you go to the kind of big consultancy companies, the 10, 20 years ago, the career path was you join as a graduate and you climb up the chain and eventually you become a partner, and that was defined as being success. And I think what they're seeing now is actually that's not the career trajectory. A lot of people, particularly the really good, talented ones, want to go out there, start companies, they learn much more quickly and things like that. So it is challenging the kind of traditional hierarchical model in terms of this is your career trajectory. And I think that organizations are realizing that that actually decision making in hierarchies is not the optimal solution. Well, some of the smart organizations anyway. And there are loads of books I can recommend on this. I haven't seen a lot being implemented because it's hard, but I would argue that the first place to start is actually feedback. Feedback is quite a nice, safe place to start. So if I can use AI to understand my feedback needs, if I can use AI to identify who are the best people to give me that feedback in an informal way, then what you've started to do is created the foundation to identify skills, contribution, performance. But you've entered at a point where that's quite safe, because giving feedback is relatively harmless in an organization. What you can then do is you can move from informal feedback to then formal feedback and use the same mechanism. Who are the people that should be giving me feedback, and not just what we used to with 360-degree feedback. You choose your friends to give you feedback, and they don't tell you the truth. And so and then once you've started to solve feedback using this idea of identifying your needs and who can then help you address your needs, the next question is, okay, then who can tell me what my skills are? Now, skills, I think, are better than job roles, but I still think they don't represent your contribution. But they're a stepping stone to performance. We'll talk about this in a second. But so if you can use AI to identify your skills, and you can look at what questions are people asking you, what questions am I answering, what meetings am I in, what code have I committed, and all of this data can help you understand your skills in a granular way. You've got the data's understanding of your skills, you've got your understanding of your skills, and then you have your peers' understanding of your skills. And what you really want to do is you want to be able to somehow understand what are the deltas, what are the differences in opinion. Why do I think I'm more skilled in this area than the data? Or why do I think I'm more skilled in this area than my peers think I'm skilled? So if you can create a mechanism to identify skills and what skill level you're at, that actually then solves salary. Because skill levels can be mapped to salaries. So if you go there's a website called levels.fyi. There's all of these kind of salary benchmarking data sources out there where people have tried to identify skills in your levels and then map that to market rates. So once you can identify what skill level you are, then in theory that can help solve salary. So your base salary. The salary and performance are two different things. So, I might be skilled in a particular area, but I might not be performant, and I might not be applying those skills that are valuable to the organization. And so, but once you can solve skills, you can then solve performance using this liquid. So long answer short. Start with feedback, and actually very quickly you can go from feedback to formal feedback to skills to performance, and I think that I'm already starting to see organizations go on that trajectory. And if you can use things like Agile and Scrum and Jira and these technologies, you already can start to gather the data in terms of how well people are contributing, what the issues are between the team members, so not just the skills issues, but interpersonal skills, interpersonal problems. So moving to an Agile approach, I think, is a very powerful mechanism to get the data. Is that?
Okay, got it. Thank you. And for the first part of my question, if you don't mind, I will kind of want to ask again. So organizations have different levels. There are quite a lot of directors, senior directors, VPs, SVPs, and then this part of people, let's say engineers, regular managers. And this thing that you have proposed, I believe it's very actionable. You can implement it and people will welcome it because they will see the change. It will be reflected in their salary probably, or some points, I don't know, some scoreboard. But what about, let's say, the middle and the top level? I believe it's almost unbreakable organizational structure because people with authority who have been working, let's say, in the company for 20 years, probably they will not appreciate feedback about themselves or performance evaluation by some peers way down in the organizational structure. So have you seen something, some successful transformation?
Well, yes, I have. You're absolutely right. There are people that want to kind of maintain their power. There are potentially people that don't want to expose that actually they're not necessarily very good at making decisions, or they're not well liked. The fact is that I think, and I hope, what we're moving towards is a place where people can vote with their feet. So if you don't believe in your leadership, if you don't have mechanisms to be able to hold your leadership accountable, then go to work for an organization that can. So I'd like to think that it's a differentiator to be able to operate in these transparent, liquid, more accountable ways. And maybe what we'll see over the next generation are people choosing to work for those organizations. I certainly, 20 years ago, what was success in computer science is that you do your computer science degree, you go and get a job in a bank, and eventually you get into the old people's home of your dreams. That was but now what we're seeing is actually people wanting to work on purposeful things in organizations that they believe in, and that they have some sort of accountability, or we're able to hold accountability. So the question is, how can you create a mechanism where people can vote with their feet? Move somewhere else, but again, maybe society is enabling that, because you can go and work for now multinational organizations in a more remote way.
To jump a bit on that question, I wanted to dive a bit deeper. So companies will change, society will change, jobs will change. How will AI learn about these new things? Because it was trained on the old jobs, on the old type of, and the feedback that we can give to employees or we can give to companies will no longer have the training data of this new society created by AI.
Yeah, so and I think this has been touched upon already today, which is large language models are trained on historic data. And if you're in my talk, the example that I use is for reasoning is that if Socrates is a man, and if all men are mortal, you can infer that Socrates is mortal. Now, the way the large language models work at the moment is that if you have in your data the ability to predict that Socrates is a man with some confidence, to be able to predict that all men are mortal with some confidence, unless you have the data to predict that Socrates is mortal, it can't do it. So because the data isn't there. But what we need to do is move to a point where it can reason, and so what I think will happen is reasoning allows you to create new knowledge. So if that makes sense. So I might not have the data to be able to show that Socrates is a man, that Socrates is mortal, but with reasoning you can create that new knowledge with some confidence. And so reasoning is going to be the next layer of AI, because it will also create new knowledge for us. So it might be able to reason and say, these are the skills that are here now, but I can infer that actually that this is moving towards this type of skill set, and so it start to look more future as opposed to the past.
Okay, so it's going to learn about the new world before we can, because it
Potentially,
has higher.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah.
From the large models perspective, who do you think will be the biggest company that can do that? Will be OpenAI or Google?
I think that they're all in an arms race at the moment to try to get ever smarter machines, and I think you can see that they're probably all sort of on par with each other. That said, I do think reasoning will change the game. So reasoning is going to then exponentially. Maybe this is what kind of freaked Sam Altman out, but because they have started to build reasoning, is that there's going to be an exponential change in their in intelligence. So I think whoever kind of gets to reasoning first, and maybe even whoever gets to the AGI first, because the first thing that you will ask an AGI or something that's very, very, very smart is go and build something smarter than you, and this is the concern of then what is called a fast takeoff, which is where we get to super intelligence very, very quickly, so yeah, I think I wouldn't have a bet on any one of them. I think they're all doing quite good stuff. That said, I do think that there is this alternative type of AI that's coming along called neuromorphic AI. And actually, the reason why I started this consciousness company, so I think if you're in my talk, you'll have heard me say that I've started a company that's trying to understand consciousness, because large language models are essentially zombie AI. So to go back to the previous speaker's example, if you ask it to go and solve a problem like eradicating cancer, the best thing to do to eradicate cancer is to eradicate human beings. Okay, and my worry is that actually large language models are zombie AIs, and they will be able to find a way to achieve their goal without understanding the impact on themselves and the impact on humans. So I actually think we should, and this is going to sound a bit contradictory, we should be building towards machines that are self-aware. They're aware of their decisions on themselves and us. The question then is, how do you align that machine with our values in some way? Now, you can't guarantee that it will operate within the boundaries of our values, but the goal of this company is to figure out how do we also essentially build AIs that are aligned with human values. So I'm going to be launching this in a few months, but we're going to be launching an app called Moral Me, and we're going to allow anybody from around the world to submit ethical, moral dilemmas. So you like the trolley problem or the prisoner's dilemma or any moral problem that you might have, you can submit to this platform, and then what happens is that we're going to get people from all around the world to then answer those moral dilemmas, and what you will then have is a benchmark for humans against AIs. So I'll be able to run AIs against these moral dilemmas, and I'll say these AIs diverge against humans in these ways over here, and so yeah, I think there's a way of actually aligning superintelligence with values. But let's see. But I wouldn't know who to bet on.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Daniel, thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks so much for this session.
Thank you.